Tonight we have the pleasure to speak with Dr. Peter Askim, a multifaceted artist, a conductor, a composer, double bass player, music educator, and a devoted promoter of contemporary music in the US as well as the abroad. And tonight we also have the pleasure of listening to his new piece composed for Cantus Ensemble. So, Mr. Askim, very nice to have you in Zagreb, and I'm looking forward to your first performance of your new piece. So could you tell me, how did this collaboration with Cantus Ensemble come about?
Sure. This was, let me just say first that it's amazing to be here in Zagreb, my first time in Croatia. It's amazing to be working with this incredible ensemble in Maestro Skender. It's really great. So one of the happiest things in my life was I was very busy running a music festival, running around, and I got this very strange email from somebody I'd never spoken with, and he says, "I really like your music. We want to play some of your music in Zagreb." I said, "Great." So we set up a time, we talked through Skype, and I feel like it was, we've been friends for a very, very long time with Maestro Skender. It was really very beautiful, very easy. He said, "We'd like to do some of your music." And I said, Cantus is amazing. May I write a new piece for you? So tonight is the premiere, and it was a great honor to write for them and the musicians of Cantus.
Thank you. Listening to your music while preparing for this interview, I get the feeling that your music is very emotionally charged. Because on one side you blend this rhythmic drive, almost kind of rock rhythmic, funk rhythmic drive, and the expressive lyricism of almost neo-romantic music with some textures of European modernist instrumentation, and it all comes down to your idiosyncratic music language. So could you tell us maybe something about the composition that we are about to hear and the aesthetic behind your latest musical output?
Sure. Well, I think all of those things are true. I'm a big fan of many different kinds of music. I grew up playing a lot of jazz and a lot of rock, and also loving, the hardest of the hardcore modernists. And I just feel that somehow we take everything in, and who knows what comes out. So you know much better than I do what's coming out when I'm writing. Like I always say, I just make the stuff. But this piece tonight is called A Late Winter, an Early Spring, and I had no idea when I wrote it that they would be totally appropriate for this weather. Yeah, this is a late winter, spring is trying to arrive, and I feel that this is what the piece does. It begins very cold, and it traces this journey of these small musical lines that try and find their way somewhere. We were talking earlier about this Elizabeth Bishop poem, and it really parallels that poem. It begins cold, it tries to rise, tries to find something, and it ends also cold. Like spring is trying to come, but it's not welcome yet, just like now. So yeah, that's sort of the trajectory of the piece. And when I talked to Maestro Skender about what kind of piece to write, he said, "You write what you want." And I said, these people can play anything. I could write something incredibly intricate and rhythmic, like you'll hear with Nico Mulia's piece. But maybe I'll just write something that's very, very honest and no pretension. And like you said, the emotional content is a big part of not only of my music, but why I write.
Since you've mentioned Elizabeth Bishop and this way this composition works, would you consider your composition a programmatic piece in a vein of program music, maybe?
No, I wouldn't, actually. I feel like the piece had an emotional trajectory that just kind of evolved organically, and it sort of parallels the Bishop poem, but it wasn't actually inspired by the Bishop poem. It just feels like it's coming from the same bucket or cauldron of artistic emotional expression. So it's not programmatic. It's not like bar 15. This happens, and but it has this same aesthetic of she's writing about the very northeast of the United States, which is very cold and very rugged beauty. And this is where I grew up. It's beautiful, but in a very kind of harsh way, and that really resonated with me, and those emotions as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. As a composer, I'm interested, to which extent did you intervene in the rehearsal process? And what is your experience of listening to your own pieces played or interpreted by others, other performers, or maybe by other composer performers?
Well, I'll start with that part, and not about this experience, because this is a very special and different experience for me. But I always tell my students, there's nothing like the experience of writing a piece of music and somebody plays it, and it has nothing to do with what you wrote. It's like, I think I wrote that, but it doesn't sound like that. And there's the worst experience in the world. But this is the biggest contrast, because, like I said with Maestro Skender, from the beginning I felt like we were kind of brothers in art, in a way, and he understood the music from the beginning. I didn't have to explain it. In terms of intervening in the rehearsal process, we just talked about balance. With a new piece and new orchestration and different acoustics, balance and hearing the different parts is important. And so mostly we talked about that. Just very kind of fine-tuning the balance and the orchestration.
Okay. If we take a look at pieces played on tonight's program, Cantus is playing 3 works of this new American generation of composers. The composers with very different aesthetics, with very different approaches to composing, and they also come from different backgrounds and function within different scenes. So the words that come to my mind considering this music is mainly stylistic versatility. I know that you, as a double bass player, and as you mentioned, have a background also in jazz, and Nico Mali collaborated with some of the biggest names in indie rock and electronica, for instance, Björk. And this is clearly heard in his music, as well as many other influences. For example, if we take his piece that will be played together, Step Team, it has this almost neo-Stravinskian quality to it, with its dislocated motoric rhythm and post-minimalist repetitions. And on the other hand, the piece of Roger Zer shows this strong program-like narrative quality, combining modernist language with some mainly traditional composition techniques. So from your perspective, would you say that this polystylistic approach that leads to experimentation and to forming compositional language is a typical American trait that we can trace all the way to the early experiments of Charles Ives, which is also in the program? And could you consider him the father of an American experimental tradition?
Yes, very much so. I think it's fantastic that on this program of mostly 21st century pieces that we have Charles Ives, The Unanswered Question. He was really our father in terms of not just experimentalism, but in terms of having an identity and having a purpose as American composers and American musicians. And I do think that there is a common thread throughout. I had a wonderful time talking with the composition students at the Academy today. Very, very interesting. I played them lots of American music, and their observations were very interesting along the same lines, that it's the thing that's in common is that it's all different. Right? And I think this comes from maybe even back to our heritage as, beginning a new country from nothing, and having to invent things, having to make things from scratch, and being very individual about it, and also being a little bit skeptical of authority, and a little bit skeptical of the way that things have always been done. So they say that necessity is the mother of invention, right? And I think that that's true. I think we've proven that with the American music, and also this idea that each person, kind of individualism, individual destiny. So I'd be interested to hear, what people think about the concert. But I do think that the common thread is this thread of difference, almost.
Thank you. During your stay here in Zagreb, you will be giving lectures, and you are giving lectures on Zagreb Academy to the students of string department and students of composition, and I can see some of them are here tonight with us. I'm particularly interested in your approach to teaching contemporary music and composition. I think we all know it could be a very delicate and complex process. And what is it like for you, and has it made a big difference, a big impact on your own writing and your own conducting life?
Yes, very much. One of the core things that I do, one of the most important things that I do is education. And like this morning, I learn just as much from the students as I do from, or as they do from me. And finding a way to explain these things that I sort of intuitively know about music or about contemporary music, and putting them into an easily digestible way, and thinking about it from different perspectives and how different people might understand it. That's been an incredible part of my creative process. And I have a summer festival that I started, which is based on teaching young people to perform contemporary music just being written, and also working with brand new composers, brand new choreographers. Making things with young people is one of my great pleasures, and it really does kind of inspire me in my own art.
You were talking about this principle of DIY, do-it-yourself, in America, and that leads us to another question. So you're a musician who studied on Hochschule für Musik in Vienna, and you got your doctoral degree on Yale University as well as University of Austin, Texas. And you have been a devoted promoter of contemporary music as a conductor, if we mention Raleigh Civic Symphony and Chamber Orchestra, and you were a former music director and a composer in residence of Idlewild Arts also. You were active on both sides of the Atlantic. So from your experience, how would you compare the mechanisms of promoting and performing contemporary music in the US to Europe? And the other question, what are the differences in the reception of contemporary music between the American and European audiences as well as institutions?
Well, it's a complicated question, but I think it comes down to one thing, which is money. In the States, we get very, very little money from the state, from the government, for music in general. So our entire budget for the arts, not just music, is smaller than the budget for the arts for the city of Berlin. So for the entire country of America, it's smaller than the city of Berlin's budget for the arts. So necessity is the mother of invention, right? So we must find a way to do it ourselves. I spend a lot of my time actually asking people for money. If you have any, I'll take it. But writing grants and asking individuals and corporations and trying to evangelize for this music that we feel so strongly about. And I think in a way that changes the type of process that we have and the type of audience that we have. I think in general, the European audience, also it's about education. In general, the European audiences have better arts education from a younger age and a higher appreciation for the arts, and come at it more informed. But American audiences feel it intuitively, and I think that the new generation of American composers has really found its match. It's a very good connection with new audiences, and there's a vibrancy of American music that's happening right now.
And last question. As you mentioned, you're the founder and the artistic director of the next Festival of Emerging Artists. As you said, a residency for young string players and composers focused on musical exploration and contemporary music practice. So could you maybe announce some of the names, or tell us something about the edition 2018?
Sure. This is, I think, in a way, as we were talking about it, I think it's kind of emblematic, a good metaphor for American music, is that I saw a need for something. As a young musician trying to make it in America, I said, these people need help. to go from school, where you have institutional support, to the real world, where you don't have institutional support. So I wanted to make something which was unique, never been done before, and exactly the way that I thought it should be done. So I think this was very interesting. And so we have these young players, and they're playing only contemporary music. They're working directly with the composers, with great guest artists alongside as colleagues. And this summer we're really lucky to have Tony Arnold, who's a soprano, as our guest artist, and she is working with Kurtag all the time in Hungary, and she's in Europe all the time, but also singing the most difficult works of modernism anywhere in the world and American modernism. So that will be really fantastic for the students to work with her closely. And we also have a workshop with composers, where young composers write, composer peers in their 20s write new works for the ensemble. Then we work very carefully together, and then we record them so that they can begin to develop these relationships, composers and performers. And also, then we started last year with choreographers, building relationships where composers and choreographers and performers and dancers can all collaborate in real time, making something new. And so I think this is, I don't know of another festival that does this, but I think it's great. I love it. So I'm really looking forward to this summer, and I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this performance by Cantus tonight. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who made it possible, and I really hope that you enjoy my piece and the entire program, and I'm very interested to hear what people think. Thank you so much.
Mr. Askim, thank you for this conversation, and I'm also really looking forward to the first performance. To the audiences, I hope you enjoyed this concert. Cantus Ensemble, Maestro Ivan Josip Skender, Made in America.